The resistance bands I use in my home gym setup require loop bands in order to be effective, and I'm going to go over some of the reasons why in this video in case you're interested in a similar setup. Now you really have two options when setting up the loop resistance bands. One allows it about waist height, where the other one allows you to go up overhead. So I'm going to start off with the first one, which is double looping the band under the step platform. When using the double loop method, you're really focusing on any exercise that is waist height or lower. Some example exercises for this would be a suitcase squat, Romanian deadlift, bent over row, and even the seated row. This one's kind of cheating because you're seating and doing it, but it still would be a double loop band for the setup. And as a quick note, the majority of my bigger lifts do have the double loop method as they tend to stay waist height or lower. And the second option is when you single loop the band, and as you might have guessed, this is when you do any exercise where your hand comes up above your waist, so that if it comes up to like your shoulder height or even higher, this is where you would single loop the band under the platform. Some example exercises would be an overhead press, front squat, or even overhead tricep extensions. Bicep curls would also fall into this, so anytime your hands again come above your waist, so like chest height or I'd say above, you are going to single loop it under the platform. And this is the main reason why I don't use tube style bands anymore. It's because you get these two options with the loop bands that are not possible with tube bands. With tube bands, you only get the single style of resistance. You can't have like a very tough one where it's waist or below her, and then make it easier if it's up above your waist. It's always going to be the same length band and same tension, so things like a chest press or whatever might have way too much slack for you, making it far too easy, even if you added all the bands together. So that is why I really like using loop bands for my personal setup. Not only that, but if you're trying to add more tension, you would actually have to grab onto the loop bands to reduce the amount of slack there is. And I really don't like grabbing the bands that kind of slip through your hands. They can be rough in your hands if you're grabbing them with your bare hands. So there's things like that that I just don't like. It makes it hard to standardize your exercises and keep track of them. That's really the whole point of why I use this setup, because it makes it easy to always have the same setup and see if you're progressing. So that is why I don't like doing things like grabbing onto the band and changing how much tension there is. And I'd much rather have a standard setup and either have the double loop or single loop and always doing your exercises that way. Now there are certainly some issues I have with loop style bands in general. For one, when you're doing things like overhead pressing, you will find that the loop actually goes across where your hands are. So the bands will actually be on the back side of your hand when you're grabbing the bar. You could also grab right onto the band, but again, I don't like doing that. So I'll have my hand on the bar, but on the back side of my hand will be the resistance bands, and this can be a little uncomfortable and kind of awkward. I've got used to it. It's not a huge deal, but do know it is kind of a weird setup to have the band like right behind your hand when doing each one of the lifts. It can also, depending on the band you have, provide some friction in things like doing the front squat. When you're putting it into place, it can get kind of caught on your clothing and not want to get into proper position. So these are just some minor quirks I've found when using the bands with single loop. I don't really have any issues with double looping the band because it's not across your palms at all when doing it. But just know, again, like bicep curls, same thing. When you're doing bicep curls, you'll see that the band is actually behind your palms and it can be a little weird. So again, there are some negatives when doing it, but I think the positive far outweigh the negatives in this current setup when I use my loop bands. But with all that said, and whichever option you choose, make sure you do your research and buy good bands. Now, I again use the Undersun resistance bands that have lasted a few years now. The only issue I've had is I did snap the X small band like the week I got it. Didn't hurt me or anything because again, it's the smallest band, and Undersun replaced it within a week of me saying that it broke. So it was great customer support and very, very quick for me to use here in the US. So I do highly recommend them as an option. I've never snapped any of their larger bands when doing very heavy lifts and also putting multiple bands together. Now again, they don't have weight, so I guess they're not heavy, but when using a lot of tension, I've never snapped anything but the X small band. So whatever you do, make sure you find some good durable bands, even if that is two bands, so that way you stay safe in doing your home workouts. And with that, if you want to check out more of the setup I use and how it can be effective with a home workout, take a look at the video on screen and see if this is a good option for you.